all of our staff are fully engaged around 4 areas of concentration. I'll touch on 3 of them briefly, and then we'll jump into the open spaces and public places presentation, and then open it up for questions after a few slides. The first area we found a lot of need is around food supply, food security, and the availability of local agricultural goods and the food products that they produce. The second area has been around the operations of government and tracking how state and local agencies are operating during an emergency and trying to make sure that public participation is meaningful. That's been actually pretty challenging, and a lot of interesting developments on how people can participate, but also some concerns about the inability to hear or see the comments that others are making in real time. And then third area that's been very busy, surprisingly to us initially, was the area of land conservation. Folks are at home, they're at places they feel safe and that they love, and they are really taking advantage of all the information that's available about the different programs that will help them conserve or restore their own properties. And so we're actually full bore in terms of assisting landowners and communities with conservation projects, and it's an exciting time in that respect. One of the critical issues that has come to the fore in this period, the last 2 months, is this question of open space, public places, particularly at the local level. I think people are desperately seeking places to have moments like the one in this picture. This is the trail that goes from Route 20 up to Monticello. It's on a piece of land that's under easement to the Piedmont Environmental Council, part of 2,500 acres of protected land that Monticello manages, 1,400 of which are under conservation easement. There are other places, and I need to have my thing turned on. There you go. You know, there are a lot of wonderful places in our larger region, iconic places that we get outdoors, places like Old Rag, the Appalachian Trail, the downtown mall, the tidal basin in Washington. And what we've realized very much in the last month or so is that those aren't sufficient, that those quickly become crowded or unsafe because of the number of people using them, very difficult to manage. And so those actually got to the point where they've had to be closed when we get closer to home, and in the Shenandoah National Park, there's closures there, and even the trail access from local roads has had to be shut off because of the crowds and the safety concerns that's created in all of the adjoining counties, particularly in Madison and Rappahannock counties. So increasingly, people are turning to local parks, trails, greenways as an alternative, sort of rediscovering their own neighborhoods. And it has really raised to the fore the need to have those places to let people know where they are and to have a good understanding of how they can be used in a way that's safe and fun and also healthy and restorative. I'm lucky. I have one right down the street from me in Arlington. This is Donaldson Run. It's got a local park called Zachary Taylor Park, and then across the Military Road is a regional park managed by the Nova Park system. But you know, I have 3 miles of access to trails along a creek. I walk the dog, and it's a great way to start the day. It's a great way to end the day, and it keeps me connected with nature. And it's where I'm able to, you know, get exercise and fresh air. Others have their favorite places. You know, there's some folks are able to do it on their own land and in sort of these quasi-public spaces. But increasingly, we're starting to understand how important they are, and that there's this sort of emerging discussion about distributed public access to open space as opposed to just having a few large-scale federal or state park properties. One of the examples of the amount of utilization can be drawn from counts that have been taken along the John Warner Parkway in Albemarle County, just between Charlottesville and out into the county. The trail there has seen a 400% increase year to year from last March to this March. And those are similar to numbers that are being reported at places like Sky Meadow Park, certainly on properties that we are involved in managing, somewhere between 100 to 200 to 300% increases in use. My anecdotal report from Arlington is we have literally thousands of people walking along the sidewalk in front of our house to get to the park that I showed you in a few slides ago. So one of the issues, and one that we're all learning, I think, as we go, is, how can you be safe in that kind of situation? And what are the rules of the road? How do you get the word out? How do you educate? We found that there are a lot of signs and pamphlets being put up on the internet for sharing. And one of the things we've had to do at our properties is post some of these materials, and we're thinking of other ways of distributing them. It's basically the rules of the road so that we're still practicing social physical distancing appropriately. But what's really the point of this conversation is that these places that people are discovering or rediscovering didn't happen by accident. They won't happen by accident going forward. And we really need to increase the awareness and the priority that we give to local public access and open space, both to land and water resources. This is something that we include in our training for our staff, and in this case, our PEC Fellows program. Spending time actually thinking about the open space components of a community, of a neighborhood, how it fits in with the rest of the resources, how it can be used to link to other amenities like schools or libraries or retail shopping or other parts of life, is a fundamental part of community planning and has to be a priority. The plan isn't enough. Budgeting and making sure that we have sufficient capital and operations money is part of it as well. And this is increasingly something that our PEC policy staff are working on across the 9 counties where we're active. Something we hope that we can make a higher priority within the larger conservation community, working with Virginia United Land Trust. And to their credit, their joint conference with the Greenways and Trail folks over the last couple of years has been very, very successful and well attended. So I think this is a movement, and it's very much a part of community conservation and the effort to link land conservation with public access and conversations about trails, greenways, and how people use land as well. This map is an early version of something we're going to fill out with greater detail over the coming weeks. Those red dots are places where we've had a direct role in creating local access. The list of those places is on the side, and we're going to take you through a couple of examples because PEC is known for its work on large landscape conservation, for working with private landowners on preservation of farms and forests. But the work that we've done to improve public access to both land and water is less well known, and we thought it'd be a good opportunity to try to highlight some of those projects. This one dates back, I think, almost 20 years, is the Warrenton Greenway. This is an old rail corridor. It's a rail trail project. The town and county worked together on it, and PEC was a funder of a Parks and Rec study and initiative to create the first section of the trail, and then subsequently we've been supporters of extensions. The trail runs along a rail spur that came off the Alexandria and Orange Railroad from what we know as the Route 28 corridor and up into Warrenton. It actually ends right at the old station, which is now a restaurant called the Claire's at the Depot. Terrific restaurant, a great landmark, and the trail itself has been an enormous success with literally tens and thousands of people taking advantage of that direct access to open space in the middle of an urban environment. Now it is being, the part that's being worked on now, will it extend out towards the county fairgrounds, which are about 1.5 miles out of town, and also to the Fauquier Education Farm, which is a volunteer driven effort to raise food for local food security needs, and also provide training on gardening and farming. Ultimately, that trail will also connect to the Lord Fairfax Community College, creating a very safe way of accessing all those resources from downtown Warrenton. Another example, probably bigger scale, is an initiative we've been involved in for the last couple of years to help Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, the city of Charlottesville, and Albemarle County develop a comprehensive network of bicycle and pedestrian trails and greenways. This has been pretty exciting because it's connecting parts of the community and amenities that have not been linked before. And it's opening up a whole new set of resources for people to enjoy in a way that's both healthy and safe. One example is an idea to connect downtown Charlottesville to the Biscuit Run State Park, county park. I guess it's being managed by the county. The potential access route runs across private land owned by homeowners associations in Albemarle County, and PEC has acquired a small parcel that links that right of way to the actual parkland. And now the negotiations are underway on how to open that trail up and manage it in a way that's safe and accessible to all. But what effectively it would do would make it a very short 2-mile connection from downtown Charlottesville out to a state park, 2 or 3 mile, certainly within the range of a bicycle ride. That's pretty exciting. Another example of work that we've been working on, this is with Peter Hugic, who's our Orange and Madison conservation staff person, is the trail on private lands at Montpelier and Grelin Nursery to connect trail networks that are on the 2,000 acres of Montpelier and the 650 acres roughly of Grelin Nursery. This trail, the red line connecting these two networks that are in black on the left. The trail itself is a couple miles, but it creates a network of about 15 miles of hikeable open space, and with facilities actually at both ends. Both the market at Grelin and the Grelin Nursery and Montpelier have restaurants. They have parking facilities. They have restrooms, and so it really creates a wonderful resource. And the work of planning and laying out that connecting trail was something that PEC was a partner on. Different scale, work to create a more effective community park system in the small town of Gordonsville. Interesting town with amazing history in Virginia. The connection between the railroad line from Richmond up to the Alexandria and Orange line, and a critical component of Confederate Army maneuvers during the Civil War. This is where one of the field hospitals was, and where soldiers were loaded onto trains to be taken down to Richmond. Similarly, supplies would come out to the Rapidan line through Gordonsville. After the war, a divided and segregated community. Verling Park is a collaborative effort with the town council and a local organization called Town to Trails to try to create a common space that's used by all of the community, which can be a resource not only to local residents, but to an expanding tourism opportunity. Gordonsville has done a Main Street redevelopment. They've got some great restaurants and places to stay. This could be a component of staying in town. And it's a complex of 4 or 5 urban properties coming together to expand a whole series of different recreational opportunities linked to the fairgrounds, and ultimately linked to a trail network that extends out into private land under conservation easement, with the goal being to link from Gordonsville to the town of Orange. In Fauquier, an attempt to improve access to rivers and to water resources. Remington is another historic town, another railroad depot, very strategic in the Civil War. This is the town at the crossing of the Rappahannock River for the Alexandria and Orange Railroad, fought over for all 5 years of the war. And this property came available. PEC helped raise the funds to purchase it for Fauquier with the help of Fauquier County. And it is still being developed as a park resources by Fauquier Parks and Planning. The critical issue here is to connect it to the town. And so our staff person, Julie Bolthouse, has been working with the county over several years to develop a walking trails system that connects downtown Remington to this park resource and then ultimately the river. So the program is called Remington Walks. The engagement effort around those trail systems have been very well received locally, and it's been a great way for the community to think about both the opportunities and the challenges of having a major water access park as part of their community. A smaller version of the same idea is the Chapman-DeMary Trail outside of Percival. Our staff person, Jim Bingle, has worked on that for years. This is a great resource for recreation, for education. It's something the community loves, and it's a part of long-term efforts to connect people to the Catoctin Creek. At a different scale, one of the biggest questions that we get and the concerns that we've heard expressed, especially from new residents to the Piedmont region, is the difficulty in finding out where these places are. There's a patchwork of federal, state, local, regional, and private entities that have places that have public access, but there's no single way to access all that information. And so as a pilot, we've developed an outdoors guide for Loudoun County. This is the second edition. The first edition was literally the most requested publication that PEC had published. Everybody wanted a copy. This is available both in print and online, and we hope it will serve as a model for the rest of our counties, because that way people know all the places they can go when they're open, what kind of facilities they have, and hopefully that will feed into online materials like the Trails apps and can be a resource beyond even our website. We're also involved in countywide planning for these places and the connectivity between them. You may have heard of the Emerald Ribbons Plan, which was a citizen-led initiative during the debate over the Loudoun Comprehensive Plan over the last 18 months. It's now been incorporated as a priority for the county, and the supervisors have funded a linear park and trail planning effort by the county staff. That is underway and hopefully will lead to concrete results in terms of investments by the county and then connections with other opportunities. I think the vision is you should be able to live in suburban Loudoun and get access to the wonderful resources along the Potomac River, along Goose Creek, and out to the Blue Ridge and then the Appalachian Trail. And if you could do that without getting in a car, so much the better. Different scale, but part of that network of water access and connecting communities to the resources around them is out in Rappahannock County. We're helping with the master plan for the county park, which is a cross Route 211 from the entrance to the town of Washington, both as a tourism resource, as a local resource, appropriate and accessible design of trails so that the elderly and others who need enhancements to improve their access, planting native plants and examples of both habitat improvement and stormwater management are part of that planning process. We're really pleased with how that is evolving. Clark County, there's a whole set of available options. Some are privately owned, some are publicly owned. This is sort of a Clark version of the Loudoun Outdoor Guide. Gives you a sense of how much things change when you cross the Blue Ridge. But there are great opportunities there with a variety of managers ranging from the Shenandoah University up at the Cool Springs Battlefield, Locks Mill and Boat Landing, a privately owned public access point, and then Sky Meadows Park and other places that are public lands. One of the ways that you can create access is literally to improve it. This is a place where PEC has invested in improving the access to the trailhead at White Oak Canyon. It's part of a long-term effort by Fish and Wildlife and the State Game and Inland Fisheries, Trout Unlimited, PEC, and others to improve habitat for cold water fisheries and do it in a way that also improves access, makes bridges and roads safer. We started with a before of basically a dam with holes in it, a culvert, and this was very much degraded habitat right at the entrance to the Shenandoah National Park. The bridge was partially funded by PEC and by Fish and Wildlife Service. It's on private land owned by the Graves family, but it leads to the parking lot for the trailhead, and we're very excited about how much that's improved one of the most popular access points to the Shenandoah National Park. We're also doing work in the urban environments in Charlottesville, we talked about earlier, but our partner at the Coalition for Smarter Growth has been in the forefront of trying to encourage access to open space, access to trails and transportation for those who want to ride or walk. And we're seeing great examples of that, both in Arlington, Fairfax, and in the city itself. One of the areas where there's been a lot of work done is along I-66, not a natural place for you to think of as trails and open space, but it actually connects people to a lot of park resources, and having trail access built into the widening expansion of I-66 was a real win for the activists in Fairfax County and the coalition and PEC. It will make it more than a highway, and I think in the future we'll be glad we made the effort to have that be included. It's part of an expanding network of trails around the Washington metropolitan region, and as someone who's grown up in this area since the 1960s, when there was not a trail along the George Washington Parkway, that was a new and innovative project. To see this map is just amazing. Hopefully now it'll extend out to Loudoun County through the Emerald Ribbons. Even Prince William County is moving forward with a county-wide trail system, and opportunities will expand from that kind of work together. On some of our own properties, we've been working. This is an aerial view of the Mount Zion Roundabout Meadows project. On the left is a 1850s church, Mount Zion Church, which is was an active parish, still has an active graveyard, and was part of the Battle of Aldie and during the Civil War. PEC's acquired the land over in the middle ground. And in between the two is a shared resource called the Old Carolina Road. This is the actual road that dates back into pre-colonial history. Still intact and is part of an emerging trail network we're jointly managing with Nova Parks. This is part of a complex of about 330 acres that PEC has helped acquire. Nova Parks owns a large portion on the north side of Route 50. PEC owns a large portion on the south side and the Gilbert's Corner market. We're starting to build out trail networks on our side of the road, and we will be trying to create an access from the market into the lands just to the east. So the hope here is that you've created a great resource that provides a mix of experiences: historic, habitat, passive recreation, access to local food. And if you want to volunteer at the community farm, you can do that too. So that's a pretty good combination in 330 acres. Up at the Blue Ridge, a little bit further west on Route 50, this is where Route 50 crosses at Ashby Gap. PAC has been working since basically since the year 2000 to help improve the Appalachian Trail as it crosses that part of the Blue Ridge and create a buffer to Sky Meadows State Park. We are maintaining 50 acres as a demonstration site for meadow restoration, and also a memorial site to honor those who have contributed to the conservation of land in the Piedmont. The view shed from this overlook is about 150,000 acres of conservation easements, and it's a wonderful site. The past couple weekends, we've had literally thousands of people visiting in the good weather as they come off the Appalachian Trail on a loop trail and come over to the overlook to see the view. So that's pretty fun, a fun one to be involved with. At a sort of regional scale in terms of water access, we've got projects developing to create continuous access, basically one day's trip apart along both the Rappahannock and Rapidan. On the Rappahannock side, if you work down from Remington to Kelly's Ford, there's a gap right now in terms of public access, and there's a potential project at a privately owned facility, and we're working with Game and Inland Fisheries to see if that might be an appropriate place for a public boat ramp, and that's exciting to be part of. We're also doing the same on the Rapidan, the goal being to create a whole series of access points, so essentially one day's trip in between. There's of course the network of scenic byways and historic districts, which are sort of landscape level conservation, which has been, initially was developed as a resource for those who are driving their cars from place to place. The scenic highways are mostly the historic roads that have been in place since the 1850s. Their designation allows for conservation on either side of the road to preserve its viewsheds and its character. A lot of these roads are now incorporated into rural historic districts. And as bicycling and has become a much bigger activity in Virginia, this is the network of roads that's attractive for biking and on long distances. So another way that people get open space access, even if they're in their car, but especially if they're on their bike. And then at the even larger scale, the Journey Through Hallett Brown project and the National Scenic Byway along Route 15 connecting Gettysburg to Monticello and Charlottesville has been a congressionally endorsed effort to link those open space resources and to educate the public about those opportunities. PZ doesn't do this on its own. We have tons of partners. We're so excited by the number of folks that are working on this all across the state. And Vault has been a great coordinating point, and state resource agencies are also great partners. Local governments are increasingly interested, and this is an evolving and really strengthening movement. We just wanted to give you a sense of the things we've already worked on, and then suggest that the work of the next few years is going to be much a result of the renewed focus that people have, and hopefully we'll be able to be heard about the need to plan this and then fund it for the future. We're not alone. This is an issue at the federal level with the Great American Outdoors Act, something that needs to be funded and passed and be part of the restart of the economy and the reinvestment in our own communities. Lots of things we can do together in advocacy. Supporting PEC obviously supports this work. Participating in the comprehensive planning process in your own community is critical. This has to be bottom-up process, as many good things are. And we wanted to let you know we were working on these issues in case we could be of assistance for you in projects in your own community. So thank you so much for listening to that presentation. Hopefully that gave you a different perspective and some ideas about what you could be doing or how you could be involved. And we're really happy you're here today. Hopefully you have some comments or questions we can address.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. And I apologize all in the beginning, I had a technical issue, but before we jump into the questions, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm the moderator for today. My name is Carissa Epley. I'm the Associate Director of Development here at PEC. And I've been in the Piedmont for about 5 years now, started off in Rappahannock and moved myself over to Fauquier recently. So thank you all for joining us and bearing with us through that small technical issue that we had in the beginning of the presentation. This is actually our first of a series of webinars that we're going to be offering to you guys throughout the summer and into the fall months, as we're adapting our schedules to fit a little bit more of an online format so that we can connect with you at a safe distance. So thank you again for joining us. Chris has been the president of PEC for almost 26 years now. So he has a long history with the organization and a great knowledge of everything that's going on. So Chris, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. We did have some questions that were submitted in advance. So if I could go ahead and start with some of those right now. One of the questions, and Chris, I think you did a really great job at showing the different resources that were available for people who are looking to go to an open space or a public space and experience that. Does PEC have anywhere on its website a list of places, or are those resources shared on our website so that they're easily accessible for people who are attending today's presentation?
Well, that's a good question. We do the Loudoun Outdoors Guide is on our website. Some of the properties that we own have a presence on our website. One of our hopes is that we would have a portal for the whole region. That's a project that's pending. It needs some support. And what also is happening is that the trail apps that have been developed in the private market are starting to catch up. One of the things we're trying to figure out is how we can leverage our knowledge of these places and get them into these broader resources. So the short answer is no, it's not all available through PEC's website, but it's something we are working on, and we're trying to make sure that the trail applications on smartphones and on the web include local as well as state and federal resources.
Great.
I don't know. We have other staff that are on, and Bree West has been working on this, and with our conservation staff and our local field staff. I don't know if there are additional comments on that from someone else on staff, but it's a work in progress. It's a big, it's taken us 2 years to document all the places in Loudoun County, because you literally have to go in and check with them to make sure that the information we have about location and what facilities are there and the times of opening are accurate. And it's not static. It changes a lot. So we don't want to promise to do that for all 9 counties without the resources to make sure that it's accurate information.
Great, thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and move into the next question. This one's really interesting. How did VLCF and battlefield preservation funding work out in the General Assembly for the next 2 years?
Okay. That's a question about the state of Virginia's funding for conservation projects. It's a category that's available for grants on a competitive basis. The Virginia Land Conservation Foundation has a citizen board. It has state agency staffing, and they have a set of published criteria that prioritizes the available state resources. And there's a calendared grant round, and they administer that very, very publicly and very well. Frankly, it's a good program. The funding is statutorily supposed to be around $20 million a year, but as a matter of appropriations, it's really been in the area of about $4.5 million and per year. This session, they actually approved budget amendments that would bring it close to $10 million a year, but in the final budget negotiations after COVID-19, those numbers were reduced back down to about $4.5 million. So that's not an insignificant amount of money. It's matched against federal, local, and private dollars, and it can make the difference about projects going forward. We have been applicants probably a dozen times over the last 10 years, and we have a couple proposals in front of the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation right now, but it's done projects all over the state. It's a great program. We need to let the governor and the legislature know how important it is, and to probably do some work to convince them that this is a core investment in the state, and a critical resource that COVID-19 has shown is needed at a greater level than has been previously. You know, quite frankly, almost all of our local, state, and federal resources have been overwhelmed, and there's no shortage of demand. So, hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you so much. And did you want to at all ask Dan if he had anything to add to that? Dan, our Director of Policy.
That'd be great. There are other staff on, and if they want to add to that comment, just let.
Yeah, just the specifics, Chris. With regard to where the budget actually wound up, Chris was right on the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation coming out of session. We were looking at about $10 million per year. What they did in reconvened session was the governor used a term that I wasn't that familiar with. It's called unallotted. So the new spending that was associated with some of these grant programs has been suspended until they have another check on revenues. So probably in the fall, they'll be looking at what they're expecting, and they'll make a decision on those unallotted funds. So Virginia Land Conservation Foundation, as of now, stands with $4.5 million per year, with an additional $5.5 that's unallotted. And farmland preservation, unfortunately, while there were some amendments during session, it was introduced at $250,000 per year and ended at $250,000 per year. We're hopeful to see that number go up. As Chris mentioned, that number should be closer to $2 million as it pertains to that particular grant fund. So again, VLCF is at 4.5, and the farmland preservation is at $250,000 per year. And we'll wait to see if we get additional funding for VLCF sometime in the fall, I expect.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dan. Just as an FYI, PEC has staff and lobbyists who work on these issues. So we do make this really is our priority in the General Assembly to ensure that these funding programs and incentive programs are in place. A big part of what we do in Richmond.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Chris. I have a couple other questions. This one pertains actually to your last slide. What can community members do specifically to help get municipal leaders to prioritize these places? And what's the best approach for building supporters among the decision makers?
Well, you know, to be blunt, I think part of it is getting them to see the demand that's there. That can be done through, you know, shooting video, taking pictures, having events that highlight at an appropriate time, having events that highlight the incredible demand that's out there. In the course of my job, I get to go visit places, and I do pay attention to this, but you know, right now, the reason we want to prioritize this as an issue is because it's so obvious what the demand is and what the need is. And it's a great time to capture both public attention and the attention of public officials. What I think is critical is that this is not a luxury. This is not a nice to have. This is a need to have. This is about public health. It's about mental health. It's about access to nature, which has been shown to be incredibly important to human development and to human well-being. And now's the time to really drive that point home. And I actually should have a smile on my face, because I got to tell you, the time that I've been able to spend outdoors over the last 2 months has really been meaningful. I've taken advantage of our local resources, and it's part of why I'm so passionate about this as an issue. It's made all the difference in the world to our family. And I see all the people in our community in Arlington and out in the Piedmont taking advantage of these places. We just need more of them. We gotta make that point. Last thought: if you have a good idea, don't assume that someone's thought about it. we're happy to help evaluate and promote new concepts, and we do it all the time. And if you have something you'd like us to think about, please let us know. We'd be happy to help.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. Ideally, here's another question. Ideally, what would you like to see in terms of density on these trails and locally placed open spaces? For example, should everyone be able to get out, to get to one without getting in a car to drive there? Does everyone live less than, say, 3 to 5 miles away from one of these places? What does that look like?
That's a great question. And I think that's something that's going to be debated and needs some continued dialogue. I do know of 2 sets of standards that sort of frame this issue. At the one level is the Virginia Outdoors Plan, which is a state planning document that looks at access to recreational opportunity on a statewide basis. The goal of that plan is to make sure there is a state park within an hour's driving distance for all residents of Virginia. And that's one metric that's being used. Within an hour driving distance of Sky Meadow Park, there's about 5 million Virginians. So, I'm not sure that's sufficient. There is no state park within an hour driving distance in Culpeper. So there's still a lot of work to be done, even if you use that as the determinative criteria. I think actually we're talking about something that's a much more granular. I, again, live in Arlington County, which has a goal of having a publicly accessible space really within 3 blocks of every resident. And that sounds like a lot, but it includes, small playgrounds and tot lots, as well as stream bed trails and other trails that link different neighborhoods. And as a practical matter, in most places in Arlington, you can walk to an open space resource, and it's usually 3 or 4 blocks away, and that's pretty exciting. It makes it very attainable. It means that you don't have people having to drive to get to places, and that reduces some of the parking burdens and other things. In this crisis, Arlington has become a place where people from DC and Maryland come to walk, and you can see it in the cars that are parked along the road. Take advantage of those parks. So somewhere in, for every community, that's a discussion that's going to be part of the comprehensive planning and the local ordinances. I think at the statewide level, I think one state park within every mile driving radius is probably not enough, but combined with federal and local resources, we should be able to create those opportunities for everyone. I have to say, when I started at PEC 25 years ago, this was less of an issue. I think, what's happened across the state is that more and more people don't live in the countryside, they live in urban environments. And so, with 75–80% of the state's population living on less than 2 acres of land, this question of public access lands is going to be increasingly important.
And as we are discussing, trying to get more public spaces, more open access, do you usually find that there are any local objections to these kinds of places, such as a concern with crime or safety, overcrowding, cost, maintenance, etc.? And what can we offer as objections to those arguments?
Well, those come up in all the time. When we were acquiring the land at Avoca for the expansion of the Appalachian Trail, the town of Paris made it very clear that they did not want a trail connection from the town to the trail. The early years of the Appalachian Trail had created town and trail conflicts, and they didn't want that to be an easy access point. We respected that, and I think it was an issue hopefully we'll be able to revisit as time passes, because I think the ability to connect towns to trails actually expands opportunities for business owners and others. But it's something that has to be part of a planning process, which is why the local comprehensive planning is a good place to start. I think that there are going to be different issues depending on where you are. one of the things is to be clear about how parks are going to be managed and used, and involve the public in those questions. The more that there's consensus on the design and the types of uses, the easier it is to administer down the road. And I think the tension comes in when that is in a continual education process, and people see an open space, start using it in a way that's maybe not appropriate, and then you have to be able to point to the reasons why that use is inconsistent. The crime issue, I think, that's a real concern, and I think that it comes down to making sure that these places are well known to the public officials and to the local police forces, and that there's a plan for management that includes security, and that'll vary depending on where you are. But it's a fair question, fair concern, and I think it's best addressed by making it part of the planning process.
Well, I think those are all great points. And actually, I don't think we have too many more questions left, but one question before we sign off that I would like to ask you, Chris, is with all of us practicing safe social distancing at this point and still getting outdoors, what is personally your favorite place to go to get outdoors and experience open spaces?
Well, that's a great question. I love going to the PEC properties because they really is inspiring, and it keeps my motor running. I was up on the Piedmont Overlook last night taking photographs of the full moon with our chair, George Orstrom, and with Ken Garrett, who's a National Geographic photographer. So that was a special moment to see a full moon coming up over the Bull Run Mountains, and then listen to two good photographers talk about how you take those photographs. Those are special moments. But to be honest, I get a lot of pleasure just walking on the local park in near my house. You come to know a place and you start to see things on a seasonal basis, and you sort of have the nice feeling of anticipation that comes with that. There's a portion of the stream near my house where there's some native azaleas that bloom just for a couple of weeks, but when they come out, it really transforms the forest. And I always look forward to those weeks when they're opening. The week before and the week after, when you're sort of, it gives you a good month of anticipation and enjoyment, and then a little bit of regret, but it's a part of living, and it's a good way of keeping contact with nature. So I think a variety of things. We're lucky. We live in a great place. The Piedmont's huge. There's a lot of protected land, and I actually get pleasure just driving from place to place, because I know that on either side of those scenic roads are permanently protected farms and forests, and that we're looking at a landscape that's going to stay the same in the future, and that's a good feeling. So all three.
Yeah, the Overlook, I have to say, is absolutely stunning in the summertime when all the flowers are in bloom. There's a beautiful pollinator meadow up there. So if anyone on this webinar gets the opportunity to take the hike up there, I would highly recommend it.
We've touched on a whole bunch of places, and it's unfair to pick on any particular one. I was just up at the Overlook, so it's in front of mine. But this fall, when we took the tour of the Rapidan watershed with the PEC board and saw all of the places there, all the different types of opportunities. Previous years, I've had the pleasure of hiking up that Monticello Trail, and that's just fantastic. It's a good long hike. It goes up, about 300 feet to Monticello, so it's good exercise. But you get up there, and that's a really special place to arrive at. So there's special places all over the place, and it's just a matter of knowing where they are and trying to create the opportunities to get there. And that's why this is something we want to draw some attention to, and hopefully create some real solutions and build on opportunities going forward.